Welcome to the Week 10 Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Russell Clay. We're already kind of diving in here Wednesday night, and pretty much a lot of injury situations that we need to keep an eye on. Des Bryant, Matt Forte, Julio Jones. It's kind of just going to be one of those ones where this pod could be pretty irrelevant Friday.
Week 10, no Eagles. Just a bummer. Just a bummer. I threw out a tweet the other day. So over the past 10 seasons, wide receivers been pretty solid. Wide receivers over 130, PPR points through 9 weeks too. Last week there were 12, or last year there were 12. 2015 there were 18 at this point. 18 wide receivers with 130 fantasy points through week 9. There's two. Hopkins and Brown, and Hopkins lost his quarterback. It's just Brown. That's it.
You know what the crazy thing is T.Y. Hilton's a top 5 fantasy scorer this year.
Top 5, and
he's had 3 games. It was in 3 games.
Tyreek Hill has like 5 games under 10 points, and he's WR3. This is insane. It is just so hard to find reliable wide receivers. Mike Evans obviously got suspended. Julio Jones missing practice. Mike Evans or Michael Thomas missing practice. Des Bryant probably not going to play or is going to be very limited. I mean, this is just a war zone.
I'm not even building lineups right now. Like you can't make tentative early lineups. Like go reserve your entries and then wait till Saturday night or Sunday morning, because it's really just going to be a wait and see approach for a lot of these guys. Like at least we got the Evans news, we got the Winston news. We know those guys are going to be out. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying, I mean, on a week-to-week basis, our lineup construction has always been pay up at running back because of just the volatility of wide receiver. Like you can win, with an 8 from your wide receiver, from a cheap wide receiver. You can't win with an 8 from a cheap running back.
And so I do think we have 2 locks this week. Obviously, Brown and Bell are 2 guys you want to pay up for against this Colts defense. Vontae Davis or not, I remember the last time Antonio Brown faced Vontae Davis, and
Vontae's a bum.
There was about 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, if I recall correctly. So Antonio Brown just in the absolute apex of his career, which is crazy because he's already had an 1,800-yard season. He is just going strong, and I don't see how he doesn't get 20 to 25 points as his floor, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, DK.
And that's on DK, obviously. Right. 15 to 20 floor on FanDuel for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's dive into quarterbacks here this week. Let's talk about some of these top options, in terms of high-priced guys. The Dak Prescott, obviously, he's priced up. I mean, he's QB1 in terms of pricing on DraftKings this week. I think it's fair just because he's giving you a pretty good rushing floor. It's kind of hard to trust getting a rushing touchdown to add those 6 points to his floor and ceiling. A pretty good spot on the road against Atlanta. Their defense has been pretty subpar. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Dak Prescott's been one of the best fantasy quarterbacks this year. Dez or no Dez, I mean, does that affect you a little bit in terms of if you want to use him?
None whatsoever. Literally 0 for Dak, because he'll just throw to Cole Beasley even if Dez is in the lineup. That's just – if I sound frustrated, that's because it's frustrating. I get that Cole Beasley is wide open, but you need to throw to Dez. Good things usually have happened in Dez Bryant's career. His 80 receiving touchdowns, pretty good in the red zone. But, if he doesn't play, I don't think it matters at all for Dak. He's just going to spread it around like he always does. Maybe Witten gets more involved or something. I like that offense. I like that game. I'm totally fine with paying up for Prescott. I think Tom Brady is the one we really have to talk about at the top. Fine with playing Breeze. You can play Stafford, though. Cleveland kind of mucks up those games, and Stafford's kind of, they've been awful in the red zone. Obviously, Marvin Jones played well against the Packers, just destroyed secondary. But they do struggle in the red zone, no threat of a run. So Stafford, kind of an okay play. I don't love it. I like, Breeze and Goff more. But Brady's the one I'm interested in your take on against the Broncos.
That game is not really in play for me, I think, in either way, like on either side. I'm kind of grossed out of it. Denver, back at home, say what you want about their defenses. They've had a couple of down games in a row. I just find Brady to be too expensive. I actually really like Stafford this week. Like you sound a little bit off of him, but I kind of like him a lot. As you mentioned, the red zone numbers haven't really been there. That's just mainly because they're missing Bolden from last year. Ebron hasn't become a red zone threat. They can't run in the red zone. But, you got to look. He's put up, over 20 fantasy points in each of the last 3 games. And that Pittsburgh game, he still managed 21 DK points. He didn't even score a touchdown. That was solely off yardage. He got 20 DK points. And, Cleveland's really good against the run. They're top 5 in DVOA. Abdullah, I don't see being able to run the ball. Marvin Jones, Golden Tate. These guys really should eat here at home. So, for me, it's Stafford in that top tier over everyone else.
So I suppose I was more referring to 8,200 on FanDuel. I with the 300 yardage bonus, yeah, he's a much better play on DK. That 3 points is pretty huge. I'm just looking at FanDuel. I think that's a little tougher to, rationalize in your brain. He's really only been over 20 points 2 times this year against the Cardinals and that Packers secondary. So, he's definitely in play, but not a guy I'm going to be getting exposure to. So I guess that begs the question then, Drew Brees for you.
No, I don't think so. Buffalo's defense isn't bad. In Buffalo, it's a place that, he hasn't even shown the upside at home where he's been historically better. I don't know why he would show the upside here against Buffalo. With Michael Thomas possibly out, I just think this is probably going to be an ugly game where I think it's just a lot of running back play. If Buffalo can get their way, they're going to run McCoy a ton. I kind of feel similar about all these guys. I don't see a ton of upside at quarterback this week. Dak has it. Stafford, I think, has it. As you mentioned, that was a good point of DK and FanDuel. But, I'm not really thrilled. Brady's pretty cheap. He might be able to get it done, especially if they can't run the ball. I think that's a good point. But outside of that, I'm diving down for the most part.
Big Ben, 6,600 on DK, 76 on FanDuel. That's pretty much the nuts for me. FanDuel, pretty straightforward this week. I don't think you mess around with not playing some Steelers. Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's Ryan Fitzpatrick. We play this game every year around week 10. It wasn't last year. It was early in the year. He threw a lot of picks, but for probably the past 8 years, Ryan Fitzpatrick is what do we do in week 10? Ryan Fitzpatrick in a good matchup.
As you said, we are here again. I think there's 2 cheap quarterbacks that are interesting to me this weekend. One is Fitzpatrick. Jets 8th most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. I obviously would love Patrick a little bit more if he was in with Evans, but that's not the case. Still think there's enough weapons to go around. So yeah, I don't mind him. I think he's very much in play. He's got some cheap stacking options to go with him. Eli Manning is the other one. What are your thoughts on him this week? Because we're in week 10. We're starting to see guys disappear from their offense and just in defenses and just not want to play. The Giants team's an absolute mess. I don't know if McAdoo's been fired yet, but I think he's on the verge.
I love the game. I love this game. There's going to be some DFS high. There's going to be some high upside plays in this game. Both these defenses have kind of given up. Well, 49ers have not given up. They've just been every good player on their defenses hurt, all of them. It's even last week they lost Jaquiski Tart, who's actually had a pretty decent year, and all these injuries is just. So I'm in on on Eli, he seemed to take a liking to Tavares King last week. King certainly seemed to be in the game plan, so that's certainly a stacking option. We talked about this on salary exploitation. I think all systems go with Giants passing game, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really think the only other guy for me in the cheaper range is Andy Dalton. Tennessee 22nd DVOA against the pass. They're kind of in the middle range. They rank 14th in fantasy points allowed. I'm okay with Dalton and Green. I think it's a reasonable stack this week. It's probably going to be on the contrarian side because, like you said, people are going to go Brown over AJ Green, but Green has that upside. And against the Titans secondary, I don't mind it. Like, I think Fitzpatrick, Dalton, Eli, it's an ugly group of names, are the cheapest guys that I'll consider going this week. And then when you look up top, it really is basically just Stafford. You mentioned Goff. I don't mind Goff or Prescott. I think those are the 6 that I've kind of come around to.
Yeah. No Tyrod against the Saints, D. They are really coming into their own.
Yeah, I think, if I want Bill's exposure, it's going to be through McCoy.
And I think we're at the point where we don't have to worry about this Falcons offense that much in terms of fading them, really.
I'm with you. I mean, I'm kind of just, not really looking at them this week. You mentioned Big Ben. Are you playing Big Ben in some GPPs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I am too.
If I'm projecting Antonio Brown for, 150 yards, Big Ben should probably be close behind,
Yeah, no, and I mean, really reasonable price, like 7,600 on FanDuel is not bad at all. Where, like you said, I mean, I think the 300+ yard passing game is something that you can kind of take away from Stafford on FanDuel. It doesn't make him look as good of a play. So yeah, I think that's a good point in kind of a gross zone.
Definitely. Running back, the only fun position.
This is loaded. I mean, loaded week at running back.
It's going to be that, we've had this a few times. All right, who's getting 30? Who's getting 35 on DK? That's, so we're looking at that mid-tier is really scary. Ingram, Chimera, Gordon, McCoy, kind of all just chilling there on DK. I don't love McKinnon, but, you got Hyde right there, Jordan Howard. But then you have that top tier, and it's like there's probably 10 guys, who could score 25 points this week. So it's scary. It's going to be volatile for sure.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you come down to it, I don't have any issue with the first 5 guys and playing them. Obviously, I think it's weird because, Le'Veon Bell comes in this week and obviously a pretty good spot. I still would like to see him used more in the passing game. It's kind of hasn't been enough for me this year, but a good spot. I think he comes in terms of ownership. He's going to be number 1 against the Colts. I think Ezekiel Elliott will be number 2. And then Gurley and McCoy and Fournette are kind of those other 3 in that top range where I think you're going to get a little bit less ownership. So I think Bell, Elliott are kind of the top 2 guys that we're looking at because they've been the most stable, especially Zeke. Zeke's giving you one hell of a floor this year. At the moment, he's in play because he's not suspended yet. So, I mean, Bell and Zeke, I'm going to be pairing a lot of those guys in my lap and kind of using the other guys as pivots.
So I'm all in on Bell as RB1. Obviously, there's always variance in that offense, whether he scores the touchdown or not. But beyond him, I really like Leonard Fournette this week. Now, I will say I like Phillip Rivers. Against this defense, it's scary. But Rivers is kind of the guy, even over the past few years with the Broncos defense, he kind of just knows how to dink and dunk his way. I mean, eventually, by third, fourth quarter, he probably throws a pick 6. But, for those first 3 quarters, he can kind of, dink and dunk his way. I wonder if they feature Hunter Henry and get the tight ends involved and kind of just go short pass, run the ball, and kind of, move the ball. So I kind of like Melvin. I kind of feel like they're going to be able to play the short areas of the field, which is the only place Jacksonville is even slightly vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, really, before we move down to this next tier, rank your out of those first five guys: Bell, Elliott, Gurley, Fournette, McCoy as your 1 through 5. How are you ranking them
So
this week?
Bell is my tier one, and then I think there's a pretty steep drop off, honestly. But then I go Gurley and then Zeke in the same grouping, and I have Fournette close behind them.
Okay, yeah. See, I see Bell, Elliott, Gurley, McCoy, Fournette. That's my rating of those top five.
Fair,
So
certainly
I
fair.
mean, as if we can really go wrong with any
They're
five of
all
those
A
guys.
plus, yeah, A to A plus plays this week for sure.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, I mean that mid tier, like I love Melvin this week.
7,600 on FanDuel is just so cheap. 2K less than Gurley. I mean, that's pretty good odds. Considering the matchup. And Jordan Howard, dude can get 25 to 30 touches. It almost seems likely at this point that they just don't change their game plan. They're giving him 20 to 30 touches a game. So I like him a lot on FanDuel.
Yeah, I do too. I think Howard, as you mentioned, on FanDuel is a good play. DK, it's a little bit pricey. He's just kind of, if he fits, I'm okay with it. But yeah, back to Gordon. I mean, I think GPP potential here. He's flashed a couple 30-plus upside games. You mentioned that this is a potential spot where Hunter Henry should be a featured guy in this offense because Bouye and Ramsey on the outside just kind of take away, Tyrell, or Travis Benjamin, Tyrell Williams, those types of guys, Keenan Allen, where if Rivers is smart, it's going to be running the ball. I'm curious to see if Darius can really solidify himself in that offense and help against the run. But
so that's the elephant in the room. If he can do that and they play him a significant amount of snaps, then your Melvin Gordon play goes bust pretty quick. But I don't know that he's that up to speed yet. Maybe he is, and if he plays a full plate of snaps, you're definitely gambling with Melvin, and that's why he has a price reduction. But this Jags run D has been vulnerable.
No, and I want to see 8 targets out of the backfield this week for Melvin. That's kind of crucial to his upside because those 2 30-point games that he had earlier, he had 20 targets. He had 15 catches. Obviously, had 3 receiving touchdowns. But even if he didn't have the receiving touchdowns, those are still really solid games.
Right. So Chimera, Ingram, where do you fall on those guys?
I think it's going to be back to Ingram this week. Chimera, I can't obviously knock it because he's been great. You're obviously going to get him in a little bit. Maybe ownership's pretty split this week just because of recency bias, but I'm okay with him. I think I'm going to go some other directions. Like I'd rather kind of go up to McCoy from Ingram. I'd rather use Gordon in that range. You mentioned McKinnon. I think McKinnon's interesting over even on FanDuel where he's 6,600. Like him in high 66, 6,700. I know it's not PPR, but I think it's intriguing still.
I still like this Washington defense. I still think they can do some stuff, even with a few of their injuries. So I don't know. I tend to stay away from them, but it's not a bad play.
No. If Forte's out, Bilal Powell, I mean, for me, it's fire him up. 6K on FanDuel in a spot against a Tampa Bay defense that's been horrendous. They've been banged up. He's 4K on DraftKings. He'll become the chalk of all chalk at running backs this week, if that's the case.
He will. And, solid option. Obviously, great option on BK. FanDuel.
You make the case for fading him a little more.
Yeah, I think it's a little easier. Anyone else in terms of value? You talked about Tevin Coleman on salary exploitation. If Freeman is kind of limited, certainly in play. But beyond that, I mean, I just think this is a pay-up week.
Yeah, I don't like anyone. It sounded like Green Bay was heading into more of a committee. So that takes, obviously, Montgomery wasn't a guy on my radar anyway, but Aaron Jones could have been. Yeah, I think, if Forte does play, I'm a little bit interested. The only other guy that popped up on my radar for DK was Orleans Darkwa, 4,500, 16-9, 21 rushing attempts over the last 3 games against Denver, Seattle, and Los Angeles. Pretty tough spot. In a matchup against San Francisco, I don't mind him. He's probably more of a 4 p.m. only guy if you're really looking to play that slate. Keep an eye on him because I'd rather just use Powell if that's the case. But he's an interesting name to keep an eye on.
Certainly.
So let's move to wide receiver. We don't need to talk about Antonio Brown. Let's talk about some of these other guys. I like AJ Green as a pivot. I think he's a good GPP option this week. Comes in a little bit cheaper. Going to come in with less ownership. Obviously, this Bengals offense has been dreadful. And basically, I mean, when you look, Mike Evans out of play, Julio Jones potentially out of play, Dez, Michael Thomas. This week just sets up just playing cheap-ass wide receivers.
Yeah, it does. And Green is certainly a nice play. What do you think his ownership's going to be? 15, 20% on FanDuel?
Yeah, at the most. I think that's the case.
Because people are going to want to pay up at running back or Antonio Brown. But I think Green's a nice pivot for sure.
Yeah. I mean, outside of that, I think the next jump that I make is basically to the Lions guys. Golden Tate and Marvin Jones.
Like Tate, I think Juju Smith-Schuster's certainly in play on FanDuel at 6,500. Obviously not a great price, but, in that matchup, he's great leverage on Brown, and he's coming off a 10-target, 190 receiving yard game, so certainly viable.
Yeah, I definitely do think he's viable there. Marvin Jones on FanDuel is probably going to be one of the more popular plays. 6,400. Why? I get that he had a big game on Monday night, but why did they miss him in the pricing? It's not like he's been bad the last few games. 15, 18, the 2 games prior. 14, 11, 11 targets over the last 3 weeks at 6,400. Marvin Jones is probably going to be 30%.
Yes, he is, and he's good chalk, so you can eat some of that. Sterling Shepard, 5,500 on DK. That's a great value. He's looking at 12 points, pretty much minimum, 10 targets probably in that offense. So him and Ingram probably going to eat. Robbie Anderson is looking like a great play. Obviously, that touchdown. Touchdowns in 3 straight games isn't really sustainable, but if there was a matchup to keep that going, it's certainly the Buccaneers.
Yeah, it is. Robbie Anderson's that other guy. You mentioned Shepard. I think these are all terrific mid-range options. I'm willing to go back to the well on Robert Woods and Sammy Watkins, more so actually Robert Woods than Watkins. He's just been the more consistent guy for me this year. I think the only other really cheap guys I can consider are the San Francisco guys. Marquise Goodwin, Aldrick Robinson. They both saw 8 targets last week. Both I think are wide receiver 3 punts in tournaments that you can go with. Unfortunately, it's not the most optimal situation in that San Francisco passing game, but 8 targets. I still think both those guys are viable wide receiver 3s.
Yeah, and Tavares King, 3,200, as mentioned, 6 targets last game, 3 targets the 2 previous games, but it shows that he sort of is having a role on this team, and with the injuries, maybe he's a guy that can get 6 to 7 targets a week. 3,200, what do you need? 10 points, and then you're pretty happy, in a tournament, and it frees up space for those running backs.
Yeah, and if Dez is out, obviously Terrence Williams, and I don't even think Bryce Butler is a guy you can completely rule out either for Dallas. There's a ton of options, and what do you think of Green Bay's wide receivers? Is it just they're off limits right now?
Yeah, I'm out. Trey McBride is not someone I suggest playing, but if you're desperate, they have nobody else. If Wheaton plays, obviously that's out. But if Wheaton doesn't play, McBride looked good on those 5 targets before the bye week. So certainly a guy you can think about. It's ugly out there, man. I wanted Roger Lewis to be a thing, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
No. And with Mike Evans' suspension, how are you kind of playing this Bucs situation?
I don't know. Let's be honest with ourselves, people. I certainly think Deshaun Jackson is a good play. But Chris Godwin's certainly going to get in the mix. Humphreys, Brait. It's the backup quarterback, so
But Fitzpatrick is no He's not an ordinary bet. It's not like we're
No,
going to
I
Tom
mean
Savage.
we don't know distribution of targets is what I mean. You know,
Right.
like sometimes the backup goes to the guy he's working with the second team with, so maybe that's OJ Howard. Like there could be some weird stuff. So like I like the plays. I'm just not like all in. Like Luke Stalker had that touchdown last week, I believe, right?
Yeah, and that's just some creative player in Madden.
So I mean that's kind of what I'm talking about here. Like Luke Stalker, at the goal line reception. So it's weird, man.
For me, it's Adam Humphries and Cameron Brate. I think those are the two focal points of what the offense is likely going to be. In
Okay.
Jackson, of course, but he's still not going to be a guy that's going to just get peppered with 10 targets, in my opinion.
That's all I'm saying. I gave my take. You can have yours, and I will appreciate it.
All right. Is that it for wide receiver? I mean, I think early line construction of how we've gone, it's basically those cheap options are going to be guys we've played.
Yeah, just figure it out.
Let's move to tight end. It's kind of you obviously have Gronk over on FanDuel this week, where he's 8,100. Evan Ingram's the guy for me, though, actually, if you're paying up. San Francisco hasn't been bad against tight ends, but Ingram's the guy who's just I'm going to be trying to look and plug and play. You look at in your 30 targets over the last 3 weeks, he's been above 15 fantasy points in each of the last 3 games. Like, sign me up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be another 10 targets. And if he only catches 4 of them, that's fine because they're probably going to be big plays. So, yeah, 6,200. He's expensive on FanDuel. I mean, 7,400 is no joke, but I'm in. Let's do it. Let's ride it. Sign me up for Ingram and Shepard, and we're going to enjoy that game. That game's going to be fun. I'll tell you what. I think it's going to be, 28-24. Like, there's going to be some points, some nice touchdowns in that game. And some missed field goals, for sure.
Oh, don't tell Denny Carter that. Other options up top, are you looking at like ASJ, or are you going to Jack Doyle or anything this week?
As you mentioned, Brate in play, 4,100 on DK. Kyle Rudolph sort of in that weird zone, 4,600 on DK. I'm okay with that. Delaney Walker, he's like such a safe play when he's healthy. And even when he's not healthy, still getting those targets. If he plays, I'm not afraid of him at 5K on DraftKings. 5,500 on FanDuel. That's pretty cheap for him.
Yeah, it is. I don't mind Delaney if he's fully healthy. You mentioned Rudolph. I think he's a pretty safe cash game floor over on DraftKings. No less than 90K points in each of the last 4 games. He's seen 22 receptions over the last 4 weeks. Like, he's getting his catches in. It's just a matter if he gets the touchdown or not. But when you look, I mean, Washington, not that great against tight ends, 29th in DVOA. Like, I think Rudolph's a sneaky play this week that, once again, no one just really looks at him.
Right, and we talked about Hunter Henry. I like that play quite a bit. I think he should see quite a few targets if their game plan is sound,
Yep, I'm with you. Anyone else that you can really consider? I mean, these guys are banged up, like the Washington guys. Are you looking at Vernon Davis if he's healthy?
Heck yeah, if Jordan Reed doesn't play, always. Vernon's a mismatch. He's an athletic dude, even at 34, He's clearly not peak age 27 Vernon Davis, but he's still pretty darn. He gets out there. He can scoot. Tyler Kroft, I mean, sure. Yeah. He continues, to make big plays. I don't see why, they wouldn't, at least give him a role. If Tyler Boyd plays, that's kind of weirds things out. But Kroft has been a really nice target this year. So I'd expect him to be a little more involved this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I think overall, when you look at that bottom range, Henry, Kroft, Rudolph, Davis are very much in play. Where for me up top, as you said, if Walker's healthy, very much in play. Brate Ingram. Are you paying up for Gronk at all on FanDuel?
Yeah, I think the Patriots are nice contrarian play. Well, what do we think of this Denver defense? Have they given up?
Well,
have they given
I mean, they're awful against tight ends. Like, whether they've given up or not, I think against tight ends, I mean, they're allowing the second most fantasy points per game.
Definitely. So this is more of a Patriots question than a Gronk question. You're right. That's a fair point. Like, Gronk is kind of separated from this, but do we think the Patriots like run them over, or does Denver show like some signs of life this week at home? If like their quarterback goes out there and throws a pick early, we might just see more of last week, you know?
Yeah, we could. I guess
Alshon destroyed Aqib Talib like on that go route, and I just see that's like such a Brandon Cooks route. Like if they've given up, which they kind of have, obviously everyone comes to play against the Patriots, but I mean this is something we actually have to think about now. Denver's defense with a competent quarterback, probably the best in the league. But where it currently stands, I mean, I've had to wave the white flag. I was a big fan of them a few weeks ago, you know, but this is different. So I don't know.
I think they're good contrarian options. I mean, I think Brady, Cooks, Gronkowski are all good sub 15% guys that you can look at this week. But, it's more kind of, if I'm making multiple lineups, I'll make a Patriots lineup. They're not going to be a corp for me.
No, absolutely not.
So let's look at defense. It's going to be a week where I think, I don't mind pairing my defense with my running back, and I'll kind of start with the Steelers here. This is a great spot. I don't see Indy going up and putting up some points like they did last week. That offensive line's horrendous. Pittsburgh's tied for fourth in the league in sacks. They blitz on about the core of their plays. It's going to be a rough day for Brissett, man. I don't even know if he's going to survive.
Oh, man, I know. So sad. Steelers are pretty much the nuts on FanDuel. I like that play quite a bit. Tell me why I just don't go Saints D and log out. You mentioned McCoy as a play you like. I just think this is an ugly matchup for Buffalo, even at home.
I don't know. I mean, why Tyrod doesn't turn the ball over? That's kind of my issue. Teams against Buffalo are only averaging about 5 fantasy points per game. Like, that's not great. They're going to run the ball. They're going to control the clock. There's not a ton there. Tyrod can escape pressure. I don't know. I still think there's like 4 or 5 other high upside offenses that I would kind of rather go with, or defenses.
Fair enough. So Jaguars against the Chargers. I mentioned Phillip Rivers can hold it together for a while. Is this a pick 6 week?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jags offense or defense is certainly in play. Like, there's quite a few. I mean, the Rams are in play. I think it's a hard time. I mean, basically, when you look at those 5 running backs up there, I think they're all in play outside of Buffalo's. So, like, I'm on board with anyone there. I think Detroit's in a good spot as well at home against Cleveland. You and I talked Chicago at the beginning of the week. Are you on board with Chicago still?
Oh, yeah. I've become a fan of, like, the Bears at home because it's just it's so gross. I kind of like it, like how it's just so disgusting. They make every game disgusting, but like in their favor, it like works for them, and I kind of dig it. So go Bears.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, they're allowing 16 points per game at home compared to 27 on the road. Yeah. They've averaged 12 fantasy points at home. I mean, I watched, Brett Hundley. He's not going to cut it.
No, he's not going to cut it at all. So, yeah.
Any other defenses intrigue you?
I mean, that's really my base. Do I think there could be a pick 6 in that Giants 49ers game? Sure, but I don't think we need to do that,
No, I think I'd rather go like Steelers or Bears in that range.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm with you. Once again, keep an eye out for injuries this week. Obviously it's Wednesday night. We still got to get through the more crucial practice days moving up towards Sunday. So do keep an eye on that. But I feel like we've covered a pretty hefty amount of guys that are going to be filling in and pretty much a wide range of values.
Yeah, and this is a week to definitely watch Vegas and see what's going on there. Watch those lines, see what's going on. There's rumors that the Giants might fire their coach. soon. So like if that happens, certainly pay attention. Just keep an eye on things. It's really going to be a high maintenance week. So that's all I got.
Thanks for that input, Russ.
Yeah.
That's it for us. You can check out dailyfantasycafe.com. Cheat sheets will be coming up tonight and tomorrow, and of course, we'll always be updated throughout news and stuff that are coming out through the week. If you like what we're doing here on YouTube, once again, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. If not, just tweet Russ about what he needs to do to improve, and he'll work on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see you guys in week 11.